The gold ring glinted in the harsh afternoon sun as Delilah Hayes held it up with trembling fingers, standing outside the general store in Leadville, Colorado, her throat tight with the kind of desperation that made even breathing feel like a luxury she could not afford. It was March of 1883, and the mining town sat high in the Rocky Mountains, still gripped by winter's cold fingers even as spring tried to push through. The ring had belonged to her mother, passed down from her grandmother before that, a simple band with a small diamond that caught the light just so. And now Delilah stood on the wooden boardwalk trying to sell the last piece of her mama she had left because her younger brother lay fevered and coughing in their tiny cabin on the edge of town, and the doctor wanted $5 for the medicine that might save his life. She had tried everywhere else first. The bank had turned her away when she asked for a loan, saying a 19-year-old girl with no collateral and a dead father was not a good investment. The mine foreman had laughed when she asked if there was any work she could do, saying the mines were no place for a woman, never mind that she could swing a pickaxe as well as any man if given the chance. The restaurant owner had already hired all the help she needed for the season. The laundry had no openings. Delilah had gone door to door until her feet ached and her pride lay in tatters, and still she had come up with nothing except the certain knowledge that if she did not get that medicine by nightfall, Tommy would not see another sunrise. So here she stood, holding up the ring to anyone who passed, her voice hoarse from calling out. Most people walked by without a glance, bundled in their coats against the mountain chill, focused on their own troubles. A few stopped to look, but when she named her price, $5, they scoffed and moved on. One man offered her 50 cents and seemed offended when she refused. The sun was sinking lower toward the peaks, shadows stretching long across the muddy street, and Delilah felt panic rising in her chest like floodwater. That was when she heard the jingle of spurs behind her and turned to see a cowboy approaching, tall and lean in dusty clothes that spoke of long days on the trail. He had dark hair that needed cutting, falling nearly to his collar beneath his worn hat, and eyes the color of a summer sky that seemed out of place in the harsh mountain town. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and made no apologies for it, and when those blue eyes met hers, Delilah felt something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with her current desperation. "You trying to sell that ring?" he asked, his voice low and warm despite the cold air. "Yes, sir," Delilah said, hating how her voice shook. "It is worth more than I am asking, but I need $5 by tonight, and I need it desperately." The cowboy stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and pine and something else that was just him. He was young, maybe 24 or 25, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though he was not smiling now. Instead, he was studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, except she could not seem to manage it. "Why do you need $5 by tonight?" he asked, and there was no judgment in the question, only genuine curiosity. Delilah swallowed hard. "My brother is sick. He has been coughing for 2 weeks, and now he has a fever that will not break. The doctor says he needs medicine, specific medicine he has to order special, and it costs $5. I do not have $5. I do not have 50 cents. I have this ring, which belonged to my mother, and if selling it means Tommy lives, then that is what I will do." The cowboy was quiet for a moment, still watching her face, and Delilah felt stripped bare under that gaze, as though he could see right through to every fear and hope she carried. Then he reached out, and she placed the ring in his calloused palm, trying not to notice the way her fingers brushed against his skin, or the little spark that seemed to jump between them at the contact. He held the ring up to the fading light, examining it carefully, turning it this way and that. The diamond was small but clear, and the gold had been polished smooth by years of wear. Delilah watched his face, trying to read his expression, terror and hope warring in her chest. Finally, he closed his fingers around the ring and reached into his pocket with his other hand. $5, he said, pulling out several bills and counting them carefully before pressing them into her hand. His fingers lingered against hers for just a heartbeat longer than necessary, warm and solid, and somehow reassuring. Delilah clutched the money like a lifeline, tears springing to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. You do not know what this means." "I think I do," he said quietly. Then, before she could turn away, before she could rush off to the doctor's office, he did something that made her heart stop entirely. He held out his hand, the ring resting in his palm, offering it back to her. "What?" Delilah stared at him, confusion making her dizzy. "I do not understand." "Take it," he said gently. "The ring, take it back. But you paid for it. The money is yours, the ring is yours. That is how selling works." She was babbling now, exhausted and confused and overwhelmed by everything. The cowboy shook his head, a small smile finally touching his lips, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger and infinitely kinder. "Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Xavier Anderson. I have been working cattle drives for the past 6 years, saving every penny I could because I want to start my own ranch someday. I have more than enough for medicine for your brother. And that ring belongs with you, not in my saddlebag. So please take it back." Delilah felt tears spill over, running hot down her cold cheeks. "I cannot accept this. It is too much. You do not even know me." "Then let me know you," Xavier said simply. "Take the ring, get the medicine, save your brother. And when he is well again, maybe you will let me come calling, and you can tell me all about yourself, and why a girl as brave as you are is facing this alone." Her fingers trembled as she reached out and took the ring back, the familiar weight of it settling into her palm like coming home. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will let me call on you," Xavier replied, and there was something vulnerable in his expression now, something that told her this offer cost him more than just money. "Say you will give me a chance to prove I am more than just a drifter with $5 in his pocket." "Yes," Delilah heard herself say, even though she barely knew this man, even though accepting charity went against every stubborn instinct she possessed. "Yes, you can call on me. But right now, I need to get this medicine to Tommy before it is too late." "Then let me walk with you," Xavier said, and without waiting for permission, he fell into step beside her as she hurried down the boardwalk toward the doctor's office. The doctor, a gruff older man named Harrison who always smelled of tobacco and carbolic acid, took Delilah's money with barely a grunt and handed over a dark glass bottle filled with liquid that looked like dirty water. "2 spoonfuls every 4 hours, he instructed. "Should break the fever within a day if it is going to work at all." The if hung in the air like a threat, but Delilah clutched the bottle to her chest and nodded her thanks before rushing back out into the cold. Xavier was waiting outside, leaning against the building's wall, and he straightened when she emerged. "Your cabin far from here?" he asked. "About a mile, up near the timber line," Delilah said, already starting to walk fast, her worn boots splashing through the half-frozen mud in the street. "That is a long walk carrying worry," Xavier observed, matching her pace easily. "Especially in the dark." The sun was nearly gone now, just a rim of gold clinging to the mountain peaks, and shadows pooled thick between the buildings. Delilah knew he was right, knew that the walk home would be treacherous once full dark fell, but she could not slow down, could not rest, not while Tommy needed her. They walked in silence for a while, leaving the main part of town behind and climbing up the rough track that led to the scattered cabins where the poorest families lived. Delilah was breathing hard by the time their cabin came into view, a small structure made of rough-hewn logs with a single window and a chimney that desperately needed repair. Smoke trickled out of it, which meant the fire was still going, which meant Mrs. Chen from the next cabin over had kept her word about checking on Tommy while Delilah was gone. "Thank you for walking with me," Delilah said, pausing at the door. "And thank you for the medicine money. I will find a way to pay you back, I swear it." Xavier shook his head. "I do not want you to pay me back. I want you to focus on getting your brother well. And then, when you are ready, I want you to let me come sit on that porch step there and talk with you for a while." "You would do that? Come all the way up here just to talk?" Delilah asked, surprised. "I would ride a lot farther than a mile for the chance to talk to you again," Xavier said, and the sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Delilah's stomach. She felt her cheeks heat despite the cold. "Then yes, please come. Tomorrow maybe, if you are free. I should know by then if the medicine is working." "Tomorrow," Xavier agreed. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and perfectly natural coming from him, and then he turned and started back down the mountain, his figure quickly swallowed by the gathering darkness. Delilah stood watching him go for a moment longer than she should have, before shaking herself and pushing open the cabin door. Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman who had come west with her husband to work in the mines before he died in a cave 3 years ago, looked up from where she sat beside Tommy's narrow bed, relief flooding her weathered face. "You got medicine?" she asked, her English still accented despite her years in America. "I got it," Delilah confirmed, rushing to Tommy's side. Her brother looked smaller than his 11 years, his face flushed with fever, his breathing shallow and rattling in his chest. She uncorked the bottle with shaking hands and carefully measured out 2 spoonfuls, tilting them into Tommy's mouth. He coughed and sputtered but swallowed, and Delilah sent up a silent prayer that it would be enough. Mrs. Chen stayed a while longer, helping Delilah bathe Tommy's face with cool water and banking the fire for the night, before finally heading back to her own cabin with promises to check in again tomorrow. Alone with her brother, Delilah pulled the ring from her pocket and slipped it back onto the chain she wore around her neck, tucking it beneath her dress where it rested against her heart. The metal was still warm from being in Xavier's hand, and she found herself thinking about those blue eyes, that gentle smile, the way he had given her back her mother's ring without hesitation. She barely knew him, she reminded herself sternly. He was probably just passing through Leadville like so many others, here to work the mines for a season or drive cattle through to the next town. Men like that did not put down roots, did not stick around for poor girls with sick brothers and no prospects. She would be foolish to let herself hope for anything more than the kindness he had already shown. But when she finally fell asleep in the chair beside Tommy's bed, exhausted beyond measure, she dreamed of blue eyes and a warm smile and the feeling of calloused fingers brushing against hers. The medicine began working by morning. Tommy's fever broke sometime near dawn, and when Delilah woke with a crick in her neck and panic in her chest, she found him sleeping peacefully, his forehead cool to the touch, his breathing steady and deep. She sagged against the bed frame, weak with relief, and let herself cry for the first time in weeks, great gulping sobs that shook her whole body. When she had no more tears left, she washed her face in the basin of cold water and set about making breakfast from what little they had, cornmeal mush, and the last of their coffee. Tommy woke while she was cooking, confused and weak but blessedly alert, and when she told him he had been very sick, he just nodded and asked if there was anything to eat. That more than anything, told her he was going to be all right. She spent the day catching up on all the chores she had neglected while nursing Tommy, hauling water from the creek, chopping wood for the fire, mending the holes in their blankets. It was full dark again by the time she allowed herself to stop and eat a small supper, and she realized with a mixture of disappointment and relief that Xavier had not come. Perhaps he had forgotten his promise, or perhaps he had thought better of it in the cold light of day. Either way, she told herself it was for the best. She had enough to worry about without adding a cowboy to the mix. But the next afternoon, as she was hanging laundry to dry on the line she had strung between two pine trees, she heard the sound of a horse approaching and turned to see Xavier riding up the mountain trail on a sturdy bay gelding. He sat a horse like he had been born in the saddle, easy and relaxed, moving with the animal rather than against it. When he saw her watching, he raised a hand in greeting, and despite all her stern lectures to herself, Delilah felt her heart skip. "Afternoon," Xavier said as he swung down from the saddle. "I hope I am not intruding. I wanted to see how your brother was doing." "He is much better," Delilah said, wiping her damp hands on her apron. "The fever broke yesterday morning and he has been eating and drinking. I think he will make a full recovery thanks to you." Xavier's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "That is wonderful news. I am glad I could help." They stood looking at each other for a moment, an awkward silence stretching between them, and Delilah scrambled for something to say. "Would you like some coffee? It is not very good coffee, but it is hot." "I would love some," Xavier said, and he tied his horse to a nearby tree before following her to the cabin. Tommy was awake, propped up in bed with a book Delilah had borrowed from Mrs. Chen, and his eyes went wide when he saw the tall cowboy ducking through their doorway. Delilah made introductions, pouring coffee into their 2 tin cups and giving Xavier the better one, the one without the crack in the rim. "You are the one who bought Delilah's ring," Tommy said, his voice still rough from coughing but stronger than it had been in days. "She told me all about it, how you gave her the money and then gave back the ring too. That was really kind of you." Xavier looked embarrassed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It was the right thing to do. Your sister was in trouble and I was able to help. That is all." "That is not all," Delilah said quietly. "What you did was extraordinary and we both know it." Their eyes met across the small cabin, and Delilah felt that spark again, that sense of connection she could not quite name. Xavier broke the gaze first, looking down at his coffee, but she saw the color rise in his cheeks and knew he had felt it too. He stayed for an hour, talking easily with Tommy about books and horses and what it was like to work a cattle drive, and Delilah found herself relaxing as she listened to his stories. He had grown up on a small ranch in Wyoming, he told them, the youngest of 4 sons, and he had left home at 18 to make his own way in the world. He had worked as a ranch hand, a horse breaker, a trail guide, and for the last 6 years he had signed on with various cattle drives, moving longhorns from Texas up to the rail lines in Kansas and Colorado. "But I am tired of moving," he admitted. "Tired of never having a place that is mine. I have been saving my money, and I have my eye on a piece of land just south of here, down in the valley where the grass grows thick. It is not much, just 160 acres, but it has good water and good grazing, and I think I could make something of it." "That sounds like a fine dream," Delilah said. "I hope you achieve it." "I intend to," Xavier replied, and there was determination in his voice that told her he meant it. "In fact, I am supposed to meet with the land office next week to see about filing a claim. If all goes well, I could be a landowner by month's end." "That is wonderful," Delilah said, and meant it, even as a small part of her felt sad at the thought of him settling down south of town, away from her shabby cabin on the mountain. When Xavier finally left, promising to come back soon, Tommy looked at Delilah with knowing eyes that seemed far too old for his 11 years. "You like him," he said. It was not a question. "I barely know him," Delilah protested, but she could feel her cheeks heating. "You like him," Tommy repeated, grinning now. "And he likes you too. I could tell by the way he kept looking at you when he thought you were not paying attention." "Hush and drink your medicine," Delilah said, but she could not keep the smile off her face. Xavier came back 3 days later and then again 2 days after that, and soon his visits became a regular part of Delilah's routine. Sometimes he brought things with him: a haunch of venison from a deer he had shot, a sack of beans from the general store, a book he thought Tommy might enjoy. Delilah protested at first, not wanting to accept charity, but Xavier insisted they were gifts between friends, and eventually she stopped fighting him on it, grateful for the help even if her pride chafed. As March gave way to April, and the mountain snow began to melt in earnest, Delilah found herself looking forward to Xavier's visits more than she wanted to admit. He was easy to be around, quick to laugh and slow to judge, and he listened when she talked in a way that made her feel truly heard for the first time in years. He told her about his dreams for his ranch, how he wanted to raise horses as well as cattle, how he hoped to build a real house someday with glass windows and a wooden floor. And she told him about her own dreams, smaller and more fragile, about wanting to keep Tommy safe and healthy, about wanting to learn to read better so she could understand the books Tommy loved so much, about wanting a life that was not quite so hard. One afternoon in mid-April, Xavier arrived with news written all over his face. "I got it," he said as soon as he saw her. "The land. I filed my claim yesterday and it was approved. I am officially a landowner." Delilah threw her arms around him without thinking, joy for him overriding her usual caution, and for a moment he stood frozen before his arms came up to wrap around her waist, pulling her close. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the warmth of his body even through their layers of clothing, and something shifted between them in that moment, something that had been building since that first day outside the general store. When she pulled back, they were both breathing a little harder than the embrace warranted, and Xavier's hands lingered on her waist for a heartbeat before falling away. "I want to show you," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "The land. Will you come with me? You and Tommy both, I mean. I want you to see what I will be building." "Yes," Delilah said immediately. "Yes, we would love to see it." They went the next day, Tommy still weak but well enough to ride double with Delilah on the gentle mare Xavier borrowed from the livery. The ride down from the mountain took over an hour, winding through pine forests and across rushing creeks swollen with snowmelt. And then suddenly, they emerged into a valley so beautiful it made Delilah catch her breath. Rolling grassland stretched out before them, dotted with wildflowers just beginning to bloom, surrounded on all sides by mountains that still wore caps of white. A creek meandered through the middle of the property, its water clear and cold, and to the east she could see a stand of aspen trees that would provide shade in summer and shelter in winter. It was perfect, absolutely perfect, and Delilah felt tears prick her eyes at the thought of Xavier making a life here. "What do you think?" Xavier asked, watching her face intently. "I think it is the most beautiful place I have ever seen," Delilah said honestly. "I think you chose well." Xavier's smile could have lit up the whole valley. "Come on, let me show you where I plan to build the house." He had it all mapped out in his mind, where the house would go to catch the morning sun and avoid the worst of the winter winds, where the barn and corrals would be situated, where he would plant a garden if he could figure out how to keep the deer from eating everything. Tommy ran ahead, exploring with the boundless energy of a boy who had been cooped up sick for too long, while Xavier and Delilah walked more slowly, close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, sending little jolts of awareness through her every time. "It will take time to build it all," Xavier said. "I have some money saved, but not enough to hire much help. I will have to do most of the work myself, which means it might be a year or more before I have a proper house built." "You can do it," Delilah said firmly. "I have no doubt." Xavier stopped walking and turned to face her fully, reaching out to take her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, strong and steady, and Delilah felt her breath catch at the intensity in his blue eyes. "I need to say something, and I do not want you to feel obligated in any way because of what I did with the medicine money. But Delilah, these past weeks getting to know you, they have been the best weeks I can remember. You are brave and strong and kind, and you love your brother fiercely, and I find myself thinking about you at the strangest times, wondering what you are doing, if you are smiling, if you are all right. I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to tell you. I am falling in love with you." Delilah felt tears spill over, but they were happy tears this time, tears of relief and joy and something that felt an awful lot like love. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I tried to tell myself I was being foolish, but I cannot help it. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you gave me back my mother's ring and looked at me like I mattered." "You do matter," Xavier said fiercely. "You matter so much." And then he was kissing her, gentle at first and then deeper as she kissed him back, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. It was her first real kiss, and it felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once, like everything that had come before was just a prologue to this moment. When they finally broke apart, both of them flushed and breathing hard, Tommy's voice floated across the valley. "Are you two going to kiss all day, or are you going to help me catch frogs in the creek?" They both laughed, and Xavier took her hand again, lacing their fingers together. "To be continued," he murmured, and Delilah nodded, happiness bubbling up in her chest like champagne. Over the next months, Delilah watched Xavier transform the raw land into the beginnings of a working ranch. He started with a small cabin, just one room with a loft, built from logs he cut and hauled himself with occasional help from other ranchers in the area. Delilah came down whenever she could, bringing food and helping where she was able, holding boards steady while he hammered or mixing mortar for the stone fireplace he was building. Tommy recovered fully from his illness, growing stronger and more energetic with each passing week, and he attached himself to Xavier with the devotion of a boy who had never had a father figure. Xavier taught him to ride properly, to rope a calf, to read tracks in the dirt, and Tommy soaked it all up like a sponge. Watching them together made Delilah's heart ache in the best way, imagining a future where this could be their everyday life instead of stolen moments between chores. By June, Xavier had finished the cabin and started on a barn, and he asked Delilah a question that made her heart race. "Move down here," he said one evening as they sat on the porch of his new cabin watching the sun set over the mountains. "You and Tommy. That cabin up on the mountain is falling apart, and winter will be here before you know it. Move down here, and I will build you your own cabin, close to mine but separate, so it is proper. You can help me with the ranch, and Tommy can go to the school in town, and we can court properly the way we should." "Xavier," Delilah said, torn between longing and practicality, "that is too much. You have already done so much for us." "It is not too much," Xavier insisted. "Delilah, I love you. I want to marry you someday if you will have me, but I know we need time to be sure. So let me do this. Let me give you and Tommy a better life and we can see where this goes. Please." She wanted to say yes so badly it hurt, but years of struggle had taught her to be cautious. "Let me think about it," she said finally, "and let me talk to Tommy. This affects him too." Tommy, when she asked him, was unequivocally in favor of the move. "Are you crazy?" he demanded. "Xavier has a beautiful ranch with a creek and everything, and he likes you, and he likes me, and you like him. Why would we stay up on this mountain in a falling-down cabin when we could be down there?" "Because accepting help means being beholden," Delilah said quietly. "And because I do not want Xavier to feel trapped into something because of us." "He is not trapped," Tommy said with the certainty of youth. "He is in love. There is a difference." In the end, Delilah said yes, and by the end of July they had moved their few possessions down to the valley. Xavier had built them a small but sturdy cabin about 100 yards from his own, with a real wood stove and a loft where Tommy could sleep, and a porch that caught the morning sun. It was the nicest place Delilah had ever lived, and she cried when she first walked into it, overwhelmed by Xavier's generosity and care. Living so close to Xavier, seeing him every day, only deepened Delilah's feelings for him. He was up before dawn every morning, working until dark to get the ranch running, but he always made time to eat meals with them, to help Tommy with his lessons, to walk with Delilah in the cool evenings and talk about everything and nothing. He kissed her often now, sweet kisses that made her toes curl, and sometimes, when they thought Tommy was not watching, longer, deeper kisses that left her breathless and wanting more. By August, Xavier had bought his first cattle, a small herd of 20 longhorns that he planned to breed up over the years, and he hired a drifter named Jake to help him with the heavy work. Delilah took over the cooking for the hands, earning her keep that way, and she also started a garden that surprisingly thrived in the valley soil. Tommy enrolled in the school in Leadville, riding down 3 times a week on the pony Xavier had bought him, and Delilah watched her brother blossom in ways she had never imagined, growing taller and stronger and happier than she had seen him since their father died. One evening in early September, as summer was giving way to fall and the aspens were beginning to turn gold, Xavier asked Delilah to take a walk with him after supper. They strolled along the creek, the water burbling softly over stones, the air cool and crisp with the promise of coming winter. Xavier seemed nervous, which was unusual for him, and Delilah waited patiently for him to say whatever was on his mind. Finally, he stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Delilah Hayes, I have been in love with you since the day I met you outside that general store, holding up your mama's ring with tears in your eyes and steel in your spine. These past months living near you, working beside you, have only made me more certain that you are the woman I want to spend my life with. I know we have not been courting for very long by traditional standards, but out here, life moves faster, and I do not want to waste a single day. So I am asking you now, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and help me build this ranch into something we can pass down to our children someday?" Delilah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Xavier. I love you so much." Xavier whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing, and when he set her down, he kissed her so thoroughly that she forgot where they were, forgot everything except the feeling of his mouth on hers and his arms around her and the absolute certainty that this was right. This was real. This was forever. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony in Leadville with Tommy as Xavier's best man and Mrs. Chen as Delilah's matron of honor. Delilah wore a dress that Mrs. Chen helped her sew from blue calico that matched Xavier's eyes, and she wore her mother's ring on a chain around her neck, the diamond catching the light as she spoke her vows. Xavier wore his best shirt and new trousers, and when the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed her with such tenderness that Delilah felt tears slide down her cheeks. That night, in Xavier's cabin that was now their cabin, he made love to her slowly and sweetly, his hands and mouth worshiping her like she was something sacred. Delilah had been nervous, not knowing what to expect, but Xavier was patient and gentle, and by the time he finally moved over her and made them truly one, she was trembling with need and love and joy. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart, she felt peace settle over her like a blanket. "I love you, Mrs. Anderson," Xavier murmured into her hair. "I love you too," Delilah whispered back, and she had never meant anything more in her life. The first year of their marriage was hard work but deeply satisfying. Tommy moved into the loft of their cabin, giving up the smaller cabin to Jake and a second-hand Xavier hired in the spring. Together, they built up the ranch slowly but steadily, adding cattle and horses, expanding the barn, putting in fences. Delilah discovered she had a talent for horse training, able to gentle even the wildest mustangs with patience and kindness. And Xavier looked at her with such pride and love whenever she successfully broke a new horse that it made her feel like she could do anything. In the spring of 1885, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She was 21 years old, married to the man she loved beyond reason, living on a beautiful ranch in a valley that felt like paradise, and now she was going to have a baby. When she told Xavier, he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe, his voice rough with emotion as he thanked her over and over, as though she had given him the greatest gift in the world. Their son was born in December of that year, a cold night when the snow was falling thick outside and the cabin was warm with firelight. Mrs. Chen served as midwife, and Xavier held Delilah's hand through every contraction, his face pale but determined. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Xavier cut the cord with shaking hands and then cradled his son like he was made of glass, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Delilah, thank you for this." They named him James, after Xavier's father, and from the moment he was born, he was the center of their world. Tommy, now 13 and shooting up like a weed, was a devoted uncle, always wanting to hold the baby or make him laugh. Xavier was a hands-on father in a way that surprised some of the neighboring ranchers but delighted Delilah, changing diapers and walking the floor with a colicky baby, and singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By the time James was 2, they had over 100 head of cattle and a growing reputation for the quality of their horses. Xavier had expanded the cabin, adding 2 more rooms and a proper kitchen, and he had started on the bigger house he had always dreamed of, building it slowly as time and money allowed. Delilah worked alongside him in everything, a true partner in every sense of the word, and their love only deepened with time, weathering the inevitable challenges and disagreements that came with ranching and parenthood. In 1888, Delilah gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Delilah's mother. She had Delilah's dark hair and Xavier's blue eyes, and from the moment she could walk, she was following her father around the ranch, determined to do everything her big brother did. Xavier doted on her shamelessly, and Delilah often found him sitting on the porch at sunset with Sarah in his lap, telling her stories about the old days on the cattle drives or singing the same lullabies he had sung to James. Tommy, now 16, had grown into a fine young man, tall and strong and good with both horses and cattle. He worked the ranch alongside Xavier like a full partner, and Xavier had started talking about deeding him a portion of the land when he turned 18, ensuring he would always have a place that was his. Delilah watched her little brother becoming a man with pride and gratitude, knowing that Xavier's kindness all those years ago had saved more than just Tommy's life. It had given him a future. One evening in the summer of 1889, Delilah stood on the porch of their almost finished house, watching the sun set over the mountains in a blaze of orange and gold. Xavier came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder, and together they watched James and Sarah playing in the yard while Tommy worked with a young horse in the corral. "You ever think about that day?" Xavier asked softly. "The day we met?" "All the time," Delilah admitted. "I think about how desperate I was, how scared, and how you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying." "I think about it too," Xavier said. "I think about how close I came to riding right past you, because I was tired and hungry and just wanted to find a saloon and a bed. But something made me stop, made me look at you, and my whole life changed in that moment." Delilah turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. There was silver threading through his dark hair now, and lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. But to her, he was just as handsome as the day she first saw him walking toward her with the jingle of spurs. "You gave me back more than my mother's ring that day," she said. "You gave me back hope. You gave me a future. You gave me love. I will never be able to thank you enough for that." "You thank me every day just by being you," Xavier said, leaning down to kiss her, sweet and slow and deep. "I love you, Delilah Anderson. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," Delilah whispered against his lips, "forever and always." From the yard, James called out that he had caught a frog in the creek and wanted to show them, and Sarah was demanding that Tommy lift her up onto the horse, and Xavier laughed, the sound full of joy and contentment. He took Delilah's hand, lacing their fingers together the way he had that first day in the valley, and together they walked down to join their children, their family, their life. The ring around Delilah's neck caught the last rays of sunlight, glinting gold and bright, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. She touched it briefly, sending up a silent thank you to her mother, and to whatever force had brought Xavier Anderson into her life on that desperate March day in Leadville. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting, something real. They had built a home and a family, and a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives. And it had all started with an act of kindness, a cowboy who saw a girl in trouble and chose to help, who gave her back more than just a ring, but gave her back her future and her heart. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky and the mountain air turned cool, the Anderson family made their way back to their house, together and happy and whole, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever.